Uh, yeah, on KROQ radio station, I guess I was about 9 years old, I think, and I specifically remember hearing "Beat on the Brat," and that song just really sticking out. Just wondering what that was. It sounded so different than everything else, and it was really funny and extremely simple, and it was so cool, and so I went to the record store in Santa Monica, and I bought I went there with a big jar of pennies that I had been saving, and I wanted to buy the album that had "Beat on the Brat," but they didn't have it, so I bought "Leave Home," and had nice conversations with the people there. They thought I was real cool because I was 9 years old and buying a Ramones album with a big jar of pennies. And then I got "Rocket to Russia" and then "End of the Century" when that came out, and yeah, that you know, they were. Oh, and a friend of mine named Millard who worked at this health food store that I used to go to and hang out every day, and he gave me a copy of "It's Alive," the live record, which seemed really exotic to me because it was not for sale in America. It was only for sale in England, and so I felt so. It felt real exotic to me that I had an import. You know, it just and so I didn't even, I never actually like had their first album till I was a little older. That was the one that I wanted, but I just didn't used to have that much money to buy records, and I had most of the song, like almost every song on their first album was on the live album, so I that's how I rationalized not, you know, putting the money somewhere else, because I felt like I had most of those songs on "It's Alive," you know. I am sure. It's not that I was into them before I was into other kinds of punk bands, but they did stick out in a way that they were a little more, now of course we look back and obviously they weren't a commercial band, but to me at that time they seemed like it seemed like there was three commercial punk bands, and it was the Clash, the Sex Pistols, and the Ramones, and other than that the punk was a very underground thing. But those three bands would be in magazines, you'd see them on TV, you'd see, you know, they'd be at the record store in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, stuff like that. But in terms of musically, why they stuck out, it's probably for a similar reason, because the songs were really catchy, you know. I guess I would listen to stuff like the B-52s, who had really catchy songs, and I would listen to stuff like the Germs that had more of an intense energy, that it wasn't like catchy melodies, you know. And the Ramones had the power of the hardcore punk bands, but they also had the melodic sense of some of these things that I was listening to that weren't as hard and fast, you know. And that I think they there wasn't a great deal of bands who had that combination back then. Now punk has become pop music in a way, so it's like the two things have become sort of one thing. But at that time, I thought of punk as being something that in general people didn't understand and couldn't get into, and it was too crazy for them. Like I'd play punk records for kids from school, and they would not talk to me anymore, literally. Like it wasn't even funny, it was really sad. Like I'd want somebody to be my friend, I'd invite them over, I'd play them a record I like, and then they just stopped talking to me completely, you know. So but probably if I would have played, you know, like the Ramones instead of the Germs, there might have been something there that you know, it's like the Ramones the Ramones definitely had a pop aspect to them, you know, which now in retrospect obviously like comes from their love of like, you know, 50s pop music and 60s pop music, and the music, a lot of the music that they were influenced by was hit songs, you know. I guess that's, you know, it's probably true of a lot of punk bands, but the Ramones definitely had a sense of what made a good pop song, you know, and you know, but I mean, obviously I wasn't intellectualizing any of this stuff when I was a little kid, and I didn't care if something was catchy or not catchy. That wasn't the way I thought. That's all me and thinking in retrospect. I mean, I think at the time they seemed really funny to me. Like they, aside from the lyrics being really funny and the cartoons on the inside of the albums being funny, and just how fast the music was funny, and you know and they didn't seem real to me. They seemed like cartoon characters, you know. They seemed so strange, unlike they just didn't seem like real people to me at all. It was hard for me to imagine them actually like existing and living lives as normal people, you know. So I think all those things sort of contributed to the way that I felt about them, probably much more so than whether or not their songs were catchy, because I was more interested in the energy of the music than I was in whether or not I could hum along to it, you know. I started playing guitar when I was 11, and yeah, I would learn Ramones songs, and I would learn any punk songs. I would learn Sex Pistols, Ramones, The Germs, The Clash. I don't know that nobody could mimic it. It's just basically it's no. I mean, I don't think any guitar player sounds like any other guitar player. To me, when you hear the sound of a guitar, you hear that person's nervous system, that person's skin, that person's flesh, that person's psyche. I just feel like everything in a person comes through in their guitar, and that's why like you can hear it's Mark Bolan from him playing one note. You know, he's not like Jimi Hendrix or Jimmy Page. Nevertheless, like it's every bit as identifiable. You know, and so Johnny has that, as I think any guitar player does, but especially the ones that we remember and talk about. But aside from that, the main thing in his playing that is a sort of a forgotten art is just the fact that it's all downstrokes, and you know, he in general on the first 4 Ramones albums, he's basically just doing 2 different chords. It's either he's either doing this chord or he's doing this chord, unless he's playing some kind of an open chord. But those would probably only consist of maybe that, and that. Other than that, he's just playing this or this and moving them around like that. And so that part of his playing is pretty easy to master, which is why that music, and that's the same is true for most punk music of that time. It was a lot of the time it wasn't even the full chord like that. It was just the lowest couple of notes in the chord. But as far as downstrokes, some people do it, some people don't. You know, it's a completely different sound when people do it and when they don't do it. You know, a lot of people just don't have that strength in their wrist, and that was something that Johnny just seemed to naturally have. He didn't have to work at it or anything. He just had the right strength in his wrist where he could do downstrokes for a long time and stay relaxed the whole time without tensing up. That's you know, we have other great guitar players in history who did the same thing. You know, Greg Ginn from Black Flag, Ian MacKaye and Fugazi, and you know, it's most of the great punk bands of that period of time were doing all downstrokes. You know, that was the sound. That's what made it sound like a relentless train coming down the tracks, going, you know, like at full speed. You know, that's what gives every moment of the music a sharp intensity, and it makes it gives them the music like a machine gun like quality of relentlessness, you know, and that's what these bands who call themselves punk bands now and don't do all downstrokes, their music sounds wimpy to me, and a big part of the reason is that the guitar players don't do all downstrokes. It doesn't just change the sound of the guitar, it changes the sound of the drums, it changes the sound of the bass, it changes everything when the guitarist and the bass player are doing downstrokes. The drums sound completely different as a result. You know, it's everybody's playing at one level of intensity, and it's just a feeling that there's no other way to get it, and I think a lot of people just listen to the music, and since they didn't see the music live, because there was a big period of time where nobody gave a damn about punk, you know what I mean? Like, and then in the 90s people started getting interested in it again. Like, people, you know, in general, like there weren't any popular punk bands in terms of like being like the Sex Pistols level or the Ramones level, like past I like all through the 80s basically. Like there was only early 80s there was like punk going on, and then it just seemed like it went on throughout the 80s, but it was a more underground thing. And then in the 90s people started getting interested in it again as a way of making popular music, because people had long ago given up that idea for punk.